Story 1. Mean degrading comments, yelling at me for minor inconveniences, emotional manipulation. Story 2. Low blows when angry, turned into name-calling, then screaming, then throwing things at me, followed by abuse. Story 3. Emotional manipulation starts off slowly, and then suddenly you feel responsible for their emotions. They have you exactly where they want you. Story 4. He was very interested in details of my past trauma very early on. I took this to mean he was being supportive and confided in him. He used this information to isolate me from friends and family. When his more obvious abusive behavior started, I had nowhere else to go, and it was very easy for him to manipulate me into forgiving him. Story 5. I'm sorry you feel that way. If I am so horrible, then why don't you just leave me? If I mess something up one time, she would say that I always do that behavior. I never had room to do better because even if I did, there would always be a new issue. Story 6. He would constantly follow my social media even here on Reddit. This is a new account and he would do it quietly. I only ever knew that he had been stalking my social media because he would occasionally bring up things we never discussed together. That's when I realized he was not only going through my posts but also analyzing every single comment I have ever made on anything. Story 7. Being possessive. I don't just mean around people of the opposite sex or the sex you are attracted to. I was not allowed to hang out with friends without him. I was not allowed to watch shows without him. I was not even allowed to shower without him. Anything I said or shared had to be countered with something about him until I slowly wilted away, my entire being drained by him. I know you may ask, why did I stay? I was at rock bottom and believed that I somehow deserved to be treated the way I was. I finally left because I realized he was going to kill me one day, and I would rather take a bullet to the back leaving for a better life than in the chest resign to a terrible one. Story 8. When they flat out did not respect or consider how I felt about things, the lack of consideration grew worse from there. Story 9. The excessive expressions of love at the very beginning, such as saying, I love you within 2 weeks. Story 10. The silent treatment when he did not get what he wanted from me. Story 11. He would not let me finish a word during a discussion. He would talk over me if I tried to talk over him to get my sentence across. He would raise his voice and talk over me even more. There was no way for me to express a full coherent thought or complete sentence. Ever. So I shut down. I would let him yell for hours until he grew tired of himself. Story 12. He offered to drive me everywhere. It turned out he just wanted to see where I was going and know the places I frequented. Story 13. I work with domestic violence and sexual assault survivors at a domestic violence organization. Why does he do that? By Lundy Bancroft is a fundamental text I recommend. It addresses myths and misconceptions about abuse, the different kinds of abusers, and how one person can exhibit multiple abusive behaviors. It may be helpful to reach out to a domestic violence organization for support groups, trauma therapy, and resources. I also recommend the companion book Daily Wisdom for Why Does He Do That? It offers support, encouragement, and guidance for healing from abuse. There are useful resources available about specific topics, including the Power and Control Wheel and the Equality Wheel, which illustrate what should and should not be happening in healthy relationships. Information on the cycle of abuse is also valuable for understanding patterns of abusive behavior. Story 14. Deflected completely. Nothing was ever his fault. He had a huge victim complex, and I felt sorry for him and thought our past traumas connected us somehow. Story 15. They seem very overly concerned about everything. They also want everything to be done on their terms and get upset at minor deviations. They are overly possessive and obsessive. Story 16. Gaslighting your feelings and being very controlling. You feel like you have to walk on eggshells with them all the time. Story 17. Isolating me from positive people in my life because they saw him for what he was, putting me down as a joke, and controlling what I wore. Story 18. Trying to garner sympathy or empathy on the very first date. They want you to feel sorry for them to gauge your kindness and how much nonsense you are willing to put up with. They also want to get you off kilter from the beginning, making you feel obligated to stay and entertain the relationship because you feel bad for them. A normal person would be trying to impress you on a first date, not telling you a sob story. Story 19. They act as though they are the person of your dreams in the beginning. Supportive, empathetic, and loving. The love bombing is obvious. Then the little things start. Slight complaints, a drop-off from the caring, concerned person you fell for. These things hurt worse because before you could do no wrong, but now there is a problem. You begin to panic internally, changing yourself to try to eliminate those little problems. The problem is, then the goalposts start moving. Once you change one thing, 3 more crop up and you find yourself falling behind. You mask yourself in changes to meet expectations that become more stifling and more of a burden. This is when the isolation gets really bad. They will shut you off from your friends, your family, and your hobbies. Innocuous interests become major issues in the relationship, and at this point you are internally flailing. You intellectually know that this situation is insane, but emotionally you are too invested and probably feeling trapped. The next stage involves overt abuse, which is not the topic, and I do not want to traumatize people with descriptions of all the ways an abuser can break someone. If your partner shows these signs, be vigilant. I was in an abusive marriage for 16 years, so I speak from sad experience. Story 20. Dropping the mask when things progressed, such as moving in or making things official. Making subtle comments indicating things they want to change about you. Story 21. My first memory of a red flag, having been married to my abuser for 30 years and together since we were 16, was when I was pregnant with our first child. We went to the store and got candy. I was 19 and pregnant. When we got back to the house, he told me I hadn't picked the Reese's peanut butter cups, saying I had chosen something else. My memory is very sharp and always has been, as my father had obsessive-compulsive disorder and we had to keep everything perfectly organized all the time. I ended up throwing the candy at him. Now, I understand that was him gaslighting me over a small thing and manipulating me into looking crazy. Over many years, I learned not to react to him, and he wasn't successful at making me seem crazy most of the time. I see love bombing mentioned frequently, but the beginnings of relationships often feel like love bombing. You have to look for the specific type of love bombing. Are you the only person who's ever made them feel this way? Do they say they've never been with anyone as attractive as you? All the compliments that sound exactly like what you want to hear. They pay close attention to your insecurities and weaknesses and use those to draw you in. Mine showered me with gifts because I came from a poor family, so buying me things made me feel really loved. Story 22. Everyone I knew opposed the relationship, and he told me the world didn't understand us and that age is just a number. I was 16 and he was 28 and my supervisor. I was 125 pounds. He was 350 pounds. He groomed me. We had a romantic relationship that immediately turned sexual the first time he got me alone. I dated him for over a year, my family knowing, and trying to get him fired but couldn't. I lost my best friend, and with her, my entire social circle. I spent my senior year of high school completely isolated and depressed, with more anxiety and guilt than I knew what to do with. But I didn't know why the world didn't accept us. I kind of realized that I wanted something different, still not really identifying what had been happening to me, and I broke it off over text when I went to college. He showed up at my college 6 hours away. He crossed state lines to come to my school, and I was dumb enough to go out to the car and talk to him. He screamed at me for over 30 minutes while sobbing and saying I couldn't do this to him. He took me to a motel and told me he didn't know when he'd get another chance to be with a girl. So he coerced me into sex that I would now identify as rape. He went on to do more harmful things following the breakup. I am 30 and still deal with post-traumatic stress disorder from what happened to me in the motel room. If someone knowingly isolates you from your support systems, run. Story 23. Lost his mind at me for lightheartedly commenting that the fictional character Jason Bourne was attractive as we watched a fight scene in The Bourne Identity. He yelled at me for the disrespect, then cried about how I needed to understand that he had been cheated on. This was less than a month in. I was so young and naive. I should have run right then and there. It got much worse. Story 24. The overwhelming affection and everything moving extremely fast. I should have known. Story 25. Tears, alcoholism, forgetting what they told me to do, sarcastic smiles of affection, manipulative language, obsessive complaints, threats to send me to therapy never followed through. I miss you, Mom. Story 26. She never believed she did anything wrong and always played the victim. Story 27. When I left them, they blackmailed me multiple times for hookups until they found another girl and finally left me alone. Nothing feels more worthless than unwanted sex. I called it coercion, but it felt forced and made me feel like scum. I was 15 at the time and grew up very sheltered from the adult world, feeling like I had no choice. Story 28. Sometimes it's so subtle and with slow increases, it's hard to say what were the exact first signs. Jealousy usually appears first, including over inanimate objects. Yes, I mean sex toys, or crossing boundaries, small or large. You said you won't be able to talk while at work or while with family or friends. They will show up instead. They start to guilt trip you over anything and everything. They nitpick at everything you do, how you look, and things you like. They minimize all you do to make you feel small and unworthy. They make you jump through hoops and have impossible or inconsistent standards, or test you to make sure they can trust you, even if you haven't done anything to lose their trust. Unfortunately, it becomes easier to spot early after you have already experienced hell from one person and were lucky to get away. Story 29. Parents, not a partner, but my body just felt off. I didn't realize what it meant, and I assumed feeling scared, anxious, guilty, or angry in their presence was normal, even if they weren't actively abusing me at that time. If someone in your life, especially a child, makes vague disclosures about someone or their home life, like the following: X is just creepy. I don't like home. It's not fun there. X is always serious and strict. He grosses me out. They're so angry all the time. Take it seriously. I'm not saying to jump the gun and call the police next time you hear something vaguely off-putting. Actually, don't call them unless the victim is in imminent danger or they directly tell you to do so, but ask more questions. Look deeper. Notice changes in their body language, behavior, and emotions. The mind can take a while to catch up to what the soul knows. Abuse victims don't always make full disclosures to others in their life. This can be because of fear, and vague comments help test the waters, but also because you can't process the full extent of the abuse while experiencing it. Lots of people asked me questions like, 1. Are mom and dad hurting you? I'd automatically say no. In my head, yes, they had hurt me, but they weren't hurting me right now. It was in the past. It doesn't matter. I need to focus on the good. They gave me hugs this morning. 2. Has someone touched you? Though my memory was very limited, I was conditioned to think what I could remember was normal. My logic was really messed up. I'd think, yeah, like dad is really creepy and he's touching me really weirdly, but he's not doing it between my legs, so it's normal. So I'd just say no and go on with my day. Meanwhile, my hands would be shaking and my stomach would be turning just from someone even bringing up the topic of sexual abuse to begin with. Even at 18, I thought it was normal for dads to feel up their kids in bed regularly. My 22-year-old sibling still thinks it is normal that he gropes her. She doesn't have the capacity to recognize it's wrong. She defends him and insists I'm crazy. I suspect this is because he began the grooming process when she was an infant or toddler as well. I'm dreading when she leaves home and the fog clears. I'm also scared it never will. Another aspect common for people actively experiencing abuse or trauma is that my brain wouldn't let me access the full story, as it was just too painful to bear. As a teen, I evidently had a skewed idea of what sexual abuse was, and I honestly didn't think I had experienced what I thought was actual sexual abuse, meaning penetrative acts. Vaguely, I'd have flashbacks but couldn't pinpoint who or when. I was certain dad wasn't involved. I was wrong. I'm 20 now, and things are clicking together. It's crazy how much I compartmentalized it all. This is really common with long-term abuse. On a primal level, kids need their parents and adults need their partners, especially if they are worn down so much that they can't function without them. The brain is incredible at tuning out the things within our loved ones that deviate from the role we need them to fulfill. If you're worried someone is getting hurt, focus on how they feel. The mind can take time to catch up to what the body and soul already know. Ask open-ended questions and give them time to respond. Let them talk. It might be the first time they're even considering the bad stuff as a crime. Give them time to respond to you. So much could have been different had someone realized this or understood that my vague disclosures at the time were just the tip of an iceberg. Story 30. My ex-husband is someone I grew up with. He became addicted to methamphetamine and alcohol, as well as other substances. This started an unhealthy spiral between us because I felt that it wasn't truly him, and the real person I have known my entire life was still inside. When he was under the influence, rage would come out. He would tear apart the room, hit me, drag me across the floor, anything. But in the morning, he would be the man I knew again and promise not to drink or use drugs. I am not sure if that answers the question. I guess the answer is substance abuse. Story 31. Subtle gaslighting. Taking photos of my car when I did not park straight. Unable to talk about past relationships or experiences without him getting upset. Blowing up my phone and being irate when I was out with friends. Getting upset at me if I was upset over something he did. Insisting that I was never considerate of him. Making statements that were untrue about how I felt towards him that I could not even disprove. Story 32. Telling me not to express my feelings to anyone about issues I was having because not having privacy will break a relationship was not true. He was just scared of other people seeing his actions and confirming that he was wrong. In terms of physical abuse, it started with trying to pinch my fingers hard, then attempting to break my fingers, then my wrists, then pushing, and eventually playing tug-of-war with loaded guns. It is easy to excuse pushing when you are so manipulated, but I should have left when the abuse escalated from once a month to once a week, and then to every day. Story 33. Love bombing very early on then evolves to possessiveness disguised as protectiveness. For example, if I have you on Find My, I always know you are safe. Slowly isolating you from your friends by trying to get all of your time. If you decide to go anywhere without them, it is seen as a betrayal and they pick a fight and play the victim. Story 34. He kicked me through a doorway a couple of days after giving birth to his daughter for saying he had not been up all night feeding her in front of his friends. Story 35. Racism. I should have left then. He also straight up told me he liked to study body language to manipulate people. I may have been dumb as rocks, but I was 14. Story 36. They are crazy makers, love bombers, all talk, bad temper, treat their mothers horribly. You can never have a good night without them ruining it. They are always wanting to be included and get angry if you make plans. The list goes on. Story 37. She would get ridiculously upset about the smallest things just so she could play the victim and make me feel horrible for the rest of the day, most of the time right before we went out to meet friends. Then she would act like nothing was wrong while we were out. Story 38. The first sign that I did not see was her wanting to choke me when we were kissing. It became her favorite thing later on. She would choke me until I almost passed out. Story 39. Wild love bombing, vague misogynistic comments, name-calling, anger, no friends. He is still stalking me 2 years after I ended the relationship. 2 restraining orders. Story 40. I'm probably not remembering the initial signs, but a big one for me was realizing I was forced to be a stay-at-home wife who constantly had to ask for funds for basic needs like tampons and vitamins. Meanwhile, he would spend all the money in the joint account on random things without telling me. During arguments, he would yell that it was his money, yet I wasn't allowed to get a job because I had to take care of the dogs and house. Before we got married, I had my own full-time job and had to pay over $10,000 by myself for a wedding I never wanted. He and his mother basically strong-armed me into having one. The initial sign was being guilt-tripped, before the marriage, into quitting my job to work for his mother with fewer benefits because he said we would see each other more. Otherwise, according to him, I was choosing to spend less time with him. Story 41. The first time I said something he did not like, which was not even anything bad as he misinterpreted it, he blocked me and made me communicate through a mutual friend. Story 42. He disliked all of my friends and family so that he could use it as a reason to isolate me or start to control the way I dressed. Story 43. Isolation. The love bombing might be a warning, But for me, it was the isolation from friends and family. I was made to think I was a horrible person for seeking advice about my concerns regarding our relationship. I was told I wasn't a real partner if I talked to others about our fights. He was verbally and emotionally abusive. I am glad I came out of it and did not end up permanently damaged. Story 44. The wild jealousy. Being jealous of the fact that I had boyfriends before I even knew him. He expected me to have been single and chaste before he met me. Edit to add. I was in my mid-20s and dating a man in his 40s. The power dynamic was ridiculous, and I did not have the courage, knowledge, or wisdom to recognize the red flag he was. If I encountered that behavior now, I would not tolerate it. Story 45. For me, it was the small shifts in behavior displaying controlling tendencies. Story 46. You have the usual suspects: jealousy, love bombing, early trust issues, and random outbursts of anger. One red flag that often gets ignored is when someone forces themselves into every second of your space and time. When you are together, they are either glued to you or constantly hovering. When you are apart, it is non-stop texts, calls, or keeping you on the phone endlessly, no matter what you are doing. People often dismiss this because obsessive clinginess is normalized, especially early in relationships. However, when you realize you cannot have a single moment to yourself, especially if they guilt-trip you for wanting it, that is a warning sign of what is coming. Story 47. She was always right whenever we had any argument. It is actually something she explicitly told me at one point. I will always be right and you will always be wrong, so save your breath. When she was convinced she was in the right, which is to say always, she was totally uncompromising, would not budge an inch from her positions, and kept a tough line until I gave in to the stonewalling. Then she would weaponize this victory and systematically remind me every single other time how I had messed up. I ended up stopping complaining and internalizing all the discomfort. When we broke up, I remember phone calls in which I literally screamed at her, regurgitating all the stuff I could never tell her. The crazy part? She was completely oblivious to her behavior. Even after time had passed, she was convinced she was completely innocent, maybe just a tad stubborn. She even had the gall to tell me, "We worked so well, we never argued," even though I repeatedly explained to her why we never argued. Story 48. My abusive ex started by insulting me as a joke when it was just the two of us. Then he would stop for a few weeks and randomly do it again. He would be nice for a little while and then insult me in front of people. If I said something to him about it, he was very dismissive and insisted it was a joke and that I was being dramatic. After that, it escalated into serious mental and verbal abuse in private constantly, followed by other forms of abuse. Story 49. 1. Playing games and expecting me to chase him. 2. Pushing boundaries. 3. Rushing into commitments. 4. Emotional instability. When we first started dating, he insisted he did not want to be exclusive and did not want to tell people we were seeing each other. I said okay and began distancing myself and seeing other people. Another guy I had begun seeing, and I ran into him while we were out on a date. He lost his mind, started crying, and asked why he was not enough for me. He immediately asked me to be exclusive. I agreed out of guilt. 2. He continuously pushed me to have sex long before I was ready and got angry when I refused. 3. He forced me to meet his mother on our first date. 4. He was always crying, screaming, or being dramatic over small things. He generally appeared to have no control over himself or his emotions. He slapped me for the first time about 6 months into our relationship, and I left him the second time. Honestly, I should have left him much sooner. Story 50. She separated me from my support, friends, and family. Story 51. Before the physical abuse, there was a lot of guilt-tripping and attempts to gain sympathy for everything. But if I am being honest, it happened very quickly. There were not many signs before the abuse escalated to choking me and then beating me severely on a daily basis. Genuinely, everything was fine for a while. Then it was as if something switched, becoming immediately sadistic very fast. Story 52. Being so over the top in love right from the beginning. Even that was not really noticeable until he became possessive and controlling. Suddenly, I could not do anything right. If I wore something he did not like, I was doing it to upset him. All of his bad behaviors were my fault and because of me. It can be really insidious because some of them know just how to turn the heat up so you do not notice until you are already being boiled alive. Story 53. Listening to people say terrible things about me and then telling me that I need to learn to take a joke. Story 54. He choked me the first time I teased him or mildly roasted him. I was 20, had just moved out of the house to my first apartment at college, and unfortunately met a predator. At a young age, I did not know what I was getting into. When he choked me, it was fairly early on, and I lost my composure on him. I freaked out, screamed, cursed, and threatened him. He never touched me again and stuck strictly to psychological abuse from there. Story 55. Finding reasons to fight with me, such as small misunderstandings that could be easily resolved by asking what I meant. Then having the nerve to sleep with someone else while still in a relationship with me. I became trauma bonded to her, unfortunately. Story 56. I have watched 3 relationships become physically abusive. In all the situations, the first sign I noticed was the person saying things they knew would upset the other person intentionally. They wanted to hurt the person, and the ways they did it multiplied and intensified. Story 57. How perfect they were in the beginning. I have been in a few abusive relationships, and they all started off like modern-day fairy tales but with less singing. They always seemed to be exactly what I needed at first. Looking back, that was because they were very cleverly making me dependent by being someone who could help me with whatever I was going through. What that always became later was control, making me feel like I could not do anything because they did it right and I would just mess it up, no matter what it was. I did not realize they were often preying on me when I was most vulnerable or taking advantage of any naivety I had. They often ended up hurting me the most when I was in the worst places in the relationships. Getting sexually assaulted right after a miscarriage, using my parents' death against me because I was sad and not performing my best at life, being told I needed to go to the gym after gaining 70 to 80 pounds in a week due to kidney failure when I was literally dying. Different men in each story, but they all started the same. Amazing at first. Way too amazing, so amazing you often did not see their issues for years because they wore masks for that long. I kind of went off and vented a little, and I am sorry. But the niceness always turned into some form of control or balance or, you owe me because I did this. It is usually a slow burn you do not even realize until you are fully engulfed, in my experience at least. It is always rainbows and butterflies until it becomes the worst hell you have ever been in. Story 58. He would let the mask slip, then make it out to be a joke. So when you drink, you turn into a prostitute? Just kidding. Eventually, he stopped trying to cover himself afterward. Story 59. I just talked about this in another discussion, but giving someone the silent treatment for hours or days as a power play is problematic. I understand that some people need time to cool off. That is not what I am referring to. I am referring to your significant other using silence as punishment instead of discussing issues. It seems harmless, so people do not recognize it as abusive at first. Story 60. She got jealous when I told her that I worked with the woman walking by. She became very quiet. That was a first. Story 61. He took me away from all my people. He became very angry because I was gone for about 2 hours, but he insisted I had been gone for 4 hours. Once he had me away, that is when the first physical blow struck my head. It was a sucker punch from a weak man, as we were not even in a conflict at that time. Story 62. He said he was not responsible for anything that happened after 7 p.m. because I should know that he would be drunk at that time. There were many things, but that one stands out. Story 63. Alienating you from your friends and family. Never a nice word about anyone, anywhere, anytime. They are your world now and only. Story 64. Isolation. I couldn't do anything without him. At first, I thought it was sweet that he always wanted to be around. No, he was plotting. Story 65. Very early on, he told me I was not allowed to say no to sex. I was very young and truly unaccepted by my family. He also love-bombed me intensely and seemed to really see and appreciate the real me. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. It helps to hear your stories, and I hope maybe someone else can be spared the pain and the waste of life and time that comes with being emotionally invested in an abuser. Story 66. Love bombing quickly followed by immediate distancing after sexual intercourse. I was not allowed to touch after sexual intercourse. Story 67. The dishonesty and subsequent anger when confronted about it. Story 68. If your partner regularly does things that make you feel disrespected, but you do not address them because 1, it would devolve into an argument, or 2, you are used to it, congratulations, you are in an abusive relationship. Story 69. Most abusers begin the relationship seeming like the perfect partner. Whatever you are looking for, that is what they will be. The love bombing starts immediately, making you feel like you are two pieces of a whole, and only the two of you can understand each other. They will tell you how amazing you are, how they have been searching for you their whole life, and how they did not think someone as wonderful as you even existed before you met. They will shower you with long affection, gifts, and praise. They will seem like the ideal partner, the yin to your yang, often saying, "I love you," for the first time within just a couple of weeks. They will also use this intense bonding period to begin isolating you from anyone who might recognize them as an abuser and help you escape. They will take steps to make you reliant on them but frame these actions as care and protection. Anyone who tries to warn you that something is wrong, whether your partner is too controlling, clingy, or needy, will become the enemy. You will eventually be asked to choose between your partner and others, being told it is you and your partner against the world. As the love bombing intensifies, they will spend all their free time with you and expect the same from you. They will call and text frequently, always wanting to know where you are, what you are doing, and with whom. They will want to talk until all hours of the night, not for intimacy but because sleep deprivation lowers your defenses. In the beginning, they will mirror your values and seem anything but abusive. They will be charming. Then, the subtle criticisms will begin. They will remark on how you are always working, work too hard, or do not spend enough time at home, with them, or with your children. What might have been a 5-minute disagreement in the early days will suddenly become a long, drawn-out fight, after which you will be showered with love, affection, and contrite behavior. This cycle of pain and confusion broken by periods of loving behavior leads to trauma bonding. Your brain becomes accustomed to the intense highs and lows, conditioning you to not only accept the lows but also to accept fault for them. The abuser's plan to isolate you will accelerate. They will create conflict, and you will find yourself pulling away from friends and family to avoid confrontations with the abusive partner. At the same time, they will plant seeds of doubt about those same friends and family, sometimes manufacturing anger between you by claiming someone said or did something to hurt or upset you but asking you to keep it a secret. They may claim your mother, sister, or friend is flirtatious with them. They may claim your brother spoke about you in a derogatory way. They will always tell you they are on your side, defending you. You will also find them laying claim with phrases like, "You are mine," or "You are theirs." While this might feel good at first, it is a massive red flag. If they say, "You are mine," right away you should leave. It may seem flattering initially, but it is unhealthy and a bad omen for what is to come. As the relationship progresses, they will develop opinions about what you eat, what you wear, and who you spend time with. They will frame these opinions as being in your best interest, but they are about control. If you pay attention to how they talk about others, you will find they frequently speak of others in uncomplimentary ways. Everyone else is an idiot, a slut, a bitch, a whore, or an asshole. When they speak to you about a conflict with someone else, it is always the other person's fault. Whatever abuse your partner has done, they will claim the other person made them do it. Pay attention because soon that other person will become you. Every bit of abuse they heap on you, they will tell you it was your fault. If you had just done something differently, they would not have had to behave abusively. For abusers to succeed, they must be able to break your boundaries. They start with small, subtle ways. This might look like leaving dirty dishes in the sink after you have asked them to rinse and load them into the dishwasher. Over time, they encroach more and more on your boundaries. They may begin to text and call constantly when you are spending time with others. They will coerce and guilt you into doing things you do not feel comfortable doing. When you resist, They lash out or try to convince you things are not happening the way you see them. This is the beginning of gaslighting. The longer the abuse continues and escalates, the more they will rely on conditioning, grooming, and gaslighting, not just to keep you with them but also to prevent you from speaking openly about the abuse. Story 70. Take a look at the popular posts on the Am I Overreacting subreddit. Story 71. The love bombing in the beginning. He was in love with me in under a month and proposed at the 4-month mark. He lied about his entire family situation, his parents' jobs, inflated their income, and showed me pictures of houses he didn't actually grow up in. It all unraveled when I met his parents, and I was too embarrassed to tell people and call off the wedding. He became jealous of strange things like the fact that I slept with a body pillow. He accused me of seeking attention if I wore makeup to the grocery store. Story 72. Possessiveness. I remember walking through an outdoor concert with my ex who was never big on public displays of affection. He grabbed me and kissed me hard. I was flattered as we were still casual at this point, so I asked what that was for. He said, "I was marking my territory. You." Of course, I didn't think too much about it because we had been friends for several years, hooked up a few times early in our friendship, and he was always such a great guy. He was too until I became his tree. Story 73. Looking back now, the love bombing and then slowly taking attention and love away when you did not behave how they wanted you to was like a twisted reward system. I now know that was love bombing. He came off so charismatic, and I thought I had the man of my dreams, that he was so perfect. But slowly, he started only giving love and attention when I did what he wanted. I wish I could have known that was what was happening at the time. Story 74. He gets mad that you bought your coworker a drink after he spent the whole day driving you and the coworker around in hopes that the coworker fixes the relationship you want to leave. Story 75. She felt a need to invalidate everything about me. If she does not tell you that you are good at anything, leave. It only gets worse from there. If she expresses jealousy of high school graduation pictures you have of classmates of the opposite sex, then leave. Eventually, she will try to strip you of your entire identity. It is what abusers do. It starts with jealousy of past relationships. Next, she will be throwing out your varsity jacket, pictures, trophies, and everything that ever suggested you had a life before you met her. It happens so often that the people at Goodwill and the Salvation Army know to contact the owner whenever items like that appear in their collection box. Story 76. Constantly wanting to prove you wrong, hiding conversations, grabbing and holding you during arguments without listening when you ask them to let you go. If you are missing for hours and they do not notice. When you go to spend time with them but they refuse to stop playing video games after 3 or more hours. Making excuses for why only you can visit them but they cannot come to you. Buying gifts or using intimacy immediately after an argument. Story 77. Everything is somehow your fault. Someone looked at you in a way they deemed inappropriate. It must have been the way you were dressed, standing there, or looking at them, so they want you to change it. Story 78. Subtle isolation. Never blatantly saying I was not allowed to spend time with anyone other than him, but pouting insults, barriers, and punishments whenever I tried to, until it was easier to just not talk to or spend time with anyone other than him. Story 79. Being very disrespectful to me, laughing when I cried, making fun of me, and telling me how unintelligent I was. Story 80. My ex would get upset when I talked to friends about a subject I knew a lot about. She would start berating me for being smart. Story 81. Out of character behavior when drinking usually is not out of character. Story 82. Putting you down in small ways, playing the victim, and mentioning how awful their ex is. Separate, these things seem unconnected, but together they are. Story 83. I didn't recognize it at the time, but I'm just going to tell it as it happened. I was in therapy for depression and anxiety. My therapist said, "Okay, let's have you work on some self-healing. When you're at home, do some breathing exercises and so on." I can't. My boyfriend won't let me stay home more than twice in a row. Won't let you. He'll get mad. Okay, you should tell him you need time to yourself for a while so you can focus on your therapy. If he doesn't allow you, maybe you should consider if you want to be with someone who doesn't want you to heal. Oh, okay. Later, to boyfriend. Hi. My therapist says I need to spend some time alone to heal, so I can't see you for about a month while I focus on that. No, she is lying. Come over and I will take care of you. She said you'd say something like that and to consider if I want to be with someone who doesn't want me to heal on my own terms. Just kidding. You spend all the time you need and I'll be here when you're better. 2 weeks later. Come over. It's been a month. No, it hasn't. It's been 2 weeks. Oh, sorry. 4 days later. It's been a month. Come over. It's been less than 3 weeks. Oh, sorry. After his nagging for 3 weeks, I finally gave in and hung out with him. It was unpleasant. By that point, I had realized he was manipulative and a gaslighting liar. I wanted to break up with him, but I was scared. It was not until my ex-boyfriend, who was breaking up with his wife, told me he was dishonest that it finally sank in. Story 84. A past partner who was on the autism spectrum used it as an excuse to be horrible all the time, passing it off as just being honest or unable to help but say the truth. She also emotionally walled me off anytime her abuse was not working. The first real sign, however, was her ghosting me for a day because I did not stay up all night on the phone with her. This was before we were dating. Story 85. Name-calling and shaming. Yelling or using profanity. Getting aggressive when angry, such as throwing or slamming things. This is a clear indicator that someday it will not be just objects. It may be directed at you. Story 86. When he would randomly kick me out of his apartment, either in the early morning or late at night, he also refused to stay at my place despite me living by myself. Story 87. Well, we certainly were not good for each other. I encouraged him and he progressively got worse. The first sign, I would say, was that we broke up once. He was 16, I was 15. We broke up, but I, being young, got into a relationship immediately because I was foolish. He said we were not broken up. I said yes, we were, you said so. He said no, we were not, and accused me of cheating. Things spiraled from there. Story 88. My friends are having a heart-to-heart about how it does not have to be this way. Because it was not physical abuse, it just did not occur to me that it could be abuse. There were years of walking on eggshells and consistently putting off my needs to avoid her rage. Luckily, at its root it was a hormonal issue that, through some pretty drastic surgery, has been resolved. Story 89. Every disagreement required a winner. She was always the winner. Story 90. I was a teenager and we were together for 2 weeks. He was effectively love-bombing me. Then he suddenly said that he thought we should break up. It was all a ruse to get me to express how much I loved and cared about him and to beg him not to break up with me. I was 17 when I met him. Our son is 10 years old. I had a 3-year restraining order against him by the time our son was 2 because he tried to assault me and take our son. Story 91. It happened gradually. I did not know until it was fully developed. Sorry, this is not the answer you were looking for. Story 92. Constantly accusing you of cheating, finding reasons you should not hang out with certain friends, which progresses to certain family members, and then becomes anyone who is not them. They control your social media and phone, constantly accuse you of cheating or doing something wrong. So you always owe them. They get angry, call you names, or do hurtful things, then apologize, make excuses, and act like the perfect significant other for a while. You forgive them, then they return to their same patterns. They always make excuses for their behavior and never take responsibility for their actions. Every ex is a horrible person, and they do not have many friends because everyone has wronged them in some way. I lived through this for years, and it was very hard to break the cycle. The best way was to detach emotionally from her and avoid doing anything she wanted. Eventually, she gave up and left. It is extremely hard with no support because they make you truly believe everyone you know has wronged them, and that if you talk to them, it means you do not care about the relationship. Eventually, I just stopped caring. She left, and I never looked back, even after she incessantly harassed me for years. There is an old saying, if you run into a difficult person, they are a difficult person, but if everyone you meet is a difficult person, then you may be the difficult person. This was a very important saying in my life. Story 93. The silent treatment. Not communicating, ignoring you, or leaving you unread for days, then appearing when they want something. Story 94. Aggressive and reckless driving. Screaming and yelling at other drivers and intentionally cutting people off. That should have been the end of it, but I married him. Story 95. It is easy to look back and see, but at the time and for 20 years, I did not see the signs. My family told me it was wrong, but I still refused to acknowledge it. We divorced but remained friends, and even then, I still refused to see it. I finally came to reality when I watched her have a tantrum over her new partner as they were about to divorce as well. Then I started to reflect, and I could see everything clearly from the first demand that I'd been to her will when we were 17. Story 96. When she tried to make me feel crazy because I did not remember things the way she did. Story 97. I started not wanting to tell my best friend about everything she was doing and took steps to make her look good when talking about her to my friends in general. I was worried I would come across as overreacting or falsely leading my friends into thinking she was abusive. Surprise, she was abusive. Story 98. I unfortunately experienced 2 abusive relationships at different stages of my life. The very earliest signs in both were short temper. They would lose their cool easily, snap at someone, experience road rage, and maybe throw something. The mental abuse started with jealousy and possessiveness. Story 99. Love bombing and using his mental health for pity. From there, it became the silent treatment and threats of suicide or explicit pictures of his self-harm. By the end, it was like walking on eggshells. If he went silent, then he could be harming himself or dead, and that would be my fault for making him upset. Being the kid raised to take care of everyone, this meant it would take me years to be mentally free of him. Fortunately, he taught me some very important lessons. Never trust someone who comes on too strong and pulls away just as easily. Once someone else's emotions and reactions become damaging to me, that is a sign that the dynamic is unhealthy. Do not give intimate emotional energy to someone who has not earned it. And, finally, other people's mental health is not my responsibility. If he would have killed himself because I wanted a nose piercing, an actual argument, then clearly the issue was something far deeper than that, and all I could do was recommend help. Story 100. They act like a spoiled 2-year-old for not getting their way over trivial matters. Story 101. A bit of a different one. Previous relationships ending in a bizarre way. My ex-boyfriend said his previous girlfriend took all her things while he was at work and left without a word. Then she apparently refused to have any contact with him. He claimed to have no idea what happened. Now, I know people can be unkind and suddenly stop communicating with long-term partners, but after dating him for 2 months, I also wanted to just disappear without a word. I was afraid of how he would react if I even dared to say I wanted to end it. It may not be a sure sign that a person is abusive, but maybe something to keep in mind and observe. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.